We already told you here on VisualPolitik, even though it isn't usual to hear about it, the truth is that in recent years, some things have begun to change in Africa. Since the year 2000, half of the fastest growing economies on the planet have actually been located on this continent. And according to the International Monetary Fund's forecasts, in 2018, six of the 10 economies with the highest growth rates will be African. Countries like Tanzania, Ethiopia, and the Ivory Coast are at the head of the race in terms of global growth. Now, Africa is a huge continent. It's made up of 54 individual countries, so we can find all sorts of situations here. Countries that grow a lot and countries that grow, well, less. But there's a case that stands out above all of them, and not precisely because things are going well. Yes, of course, I'm talking about South Africa, a country that was the great African hope for a really long time. Well, dear viewer, the truth is that Nelson Mandela's dream of a free and prosperous South Africa has become something of a nightmare. In recent years, things have gone really wrong. Growth has vanished, racial problems have returned, and corruption has spread throughout the country. Even Congress is actually talking about expropriating the lands of white people without any compensation. However, in February the government changed and one of the richest men in Africa became the new president. So could South Africa get back on the right path, or are we facing another great African disappointment? In this video we also want to look at what caused those good years to end and if the white population in the country faces any risk. So let's get on with it.
South African disappointment.
South Africa is a huge country. It's about the size of France, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, and Belgium all combined together, and it represents about a quarter of all of sub-Saharan Africa's GDP. Well, after the end of apartheid and after the democratic transition that began in 1994, South Africa experienced a particular golden age. Between 1998 and 2008, the economy grew steadily. This allowed the black middle class to double, and essential services such as running water reached most of the population. So, with a big economy, a vibrant democracy, a free press, and lots of civic organizations, everything seemed ready for South Africa to make the leap that would allow its people, and not just white people, to live the comfortable lives of citizens of a developed country. In other words, South Africa was expected to become a role model for the entire African continent. But hold on a moment here, because things don't always turn out quite as expected, and in 2009, this entire process ended. Since then, they've just gone from bad to worse. The economy isn't growing, unemployment has risen to almost 40%, poverty has picked up again, and public accounts are absolutely shattered. And that's not all. The latest government measures that the government announced and the current social tension have even caused announcements like this one.
Last March 2018, the Australian Minister of Internal Affairs, Peter Dutton, publicly announced that his country would consider granting a special emergency visa and refuge to the South African white population that felt unsafe in their own country.
Now, hold on just a moment here, because we're talking about an Australian minister here talking about sheltering white South Africans. I mean, are things really that bad? Wasn't this the country of harmony and reconciliation? Well, you heard what that minister had to say. But at this point, the question really still remains, what the hell went wrong? Well, we already have our culprit. We talked about him before, by the way, in a video that I will link to in the description. Do you know who he is? Well, listen up.
Jacob Zuma.
On the 9th of May 2009, Jacob Zuma became the president of South Africa. Despite his controversial record, which included accusations of rape, corruption, and even organized crime, Zuma managed to reach power thanks to the support of the popular classes, who felt that he was one of their own. After all, we're talking about one of the most prominent leaders of the anti-apartheid movement, a leader who for 10 years was imprisoned with Nelson Mandela himself, the father of the current South African nation. And this, well, it gave him a great deal of credibility. World viewer Jacob Zuma, who openly practices polygamy and is estimated to have at least 20 children, was forced to resign and leave through the back door on February the 14th, 2018. I mean, check this out. He was repudiated by his own party, the powerful African National Congress, and cornered by the opposition, who threatened him with a motion of censure. He simply had no other alternative. He had to leave one way or another. For the almost 9 years that Zuma was in power, life in South Africa was a nightmare. You see, Zuma came to power with the promise of a more prosperous country and more opportunities for the poorest, but instead, well, what do you think he did? Yep, nothing less than turning the South African government into a kind of mine, a business that simply served him and his inner circle. By the way, do you know what the first thing he did after being named president was? Well, he spent $23 million from the state budget to improve his private residence. A swimming pool here, an amphitheater there, and he even had a cow barn and a chicken coop built. But of course that's not all. On March the 16th, national prosecutors announced that they would present charges against Jacob Zuma for a multi-million-dollar purchase agreement of weapons, ships, submarines and fighter jets with European companies that South Africa signed in the 1990s. At this time, Zuma was Nelson Mandela's deputy president. Dear viewer, this weapons purchase cost over $3 billion, and the stated goal was improving national security. The real goal, though, was enriching guys like Jacob Zuma.
The arms deal was the most graphic loss of innocence of post-apartheid South Africa, and it presaged the corruption we are seeing today. David Lewis, executive director of Corruption Watch, a non-profit organization based in Johannesburg.
And this is just one case. Dozens and dozens of more cases are lined up for Zuma. So, in short, yes, he was a really, really greedy dude. In total, it's estimated that Jacob Zuma's corruption and the corruption of his inner circle have cost the public coffers more than $4 billion American dollars. And if you think that is the worst thing, well, you are very, very wrong. The worst part is that he got the cancer that is corruption to spread massively through the country. Listen up here.
Cancer.
One thing was always clear for Jacob Zuma, and he even once said it openly. His party, the National African Congress, was more important than the very South African nation that he'd been elected to serve. And what better way to put the party in the forefront than by enriching its leaders with public resources? And that's precisely what he did. Ever since Zuma came to power, corruption has multiplied. State services are a mess, and some math teachers don't even know what a square root is. Indeed, the reason they got the job was simply because they were formally affiliated with the president's party. Virtually no institution in South Africa has been spared from the corruption. So you see, one way to measure the intensity of corruption in South Africa is to look at the quality of housing that the government builds for its poorest people. If the budget is already low, when we discount what politicians take, not only in terms of money, also in construction materials, in the end, houses end up so poorly constructed that some have even collapsed. Another very common form of corruption is seizing funds that were aimed at the development of the poorest areas. For an example, we can look at dairy farms that are backed by the government. The best-known case is that of a farm promoted directly by Mosebenzi Zwane, who of course became Zuma's Minister of Mining. So one day this gentleman came to a poor community and promised to build a dairy farm that was financed by the government. Supposedly, the farm would be controlled by the workers who joined the project and who were even promised a trip to India to learn how to manage the farm. So as you can probably see from this already, it's not exactly looking great.
He said he wanted to change our lives. He said this thing was coming from the government, free of charge. He said we couldn't say don't like this thing. He said we must take it. Ephraim Kilamini, a black South African farmer.
In the end, the government spent more than $20 million, but the only ones who went on a trip were the members of this politician's church choir, and of course, he kept any leftover money. As for the farm, well, it isn't clear if any cow was ever milked thanks to this project. And this, again, is just one example out of hundreds. In recent years, billions of dollars aimed at development have been diverted, simply lost by the leaders of the ruling party. And of course, as you can imagine, all of this has caused a huge amount of economic damage. Investing in a country where any politician can stick his hands in the coffers or where public accounts are highly unreliable does not sound enticing. But now, after Jacob Zuma's forced resignation, his party was getting nervous about the upcoming elections. And the big question now becomes, will the new government change things?
Change?
On February 15, 2018, after Jacob Zuma's resignation, Cyril Ramaphosa, another historic leader of the anti-apartheid movement, was named president. We aren't talking about just any guy though. Mr. Ramaphosa left politics at the end of the 90s and leapt into the business world. And you know what? Thanks to his influence and his good relations with the government, Ramaphosa became one of the wealthiest men in sub-Saharan Africa. His current fortune is estimated to be close to $500 million. Well, the fact is that this new president has promised a new dawn, and he has said that his policy will prioritize balancing public accounts, attracting investment, and fighting corruption. His motto is, South Africa is open for business. Of course, he's already facing some problems. In March, the National Assembly approved the start of the process to change the constitution in such a way that the government can expropriate the lands of the white population without any compensation. And if they do carry this out, investments are certainly not going to come to the country. In fact, they're going to flee. In the end, only time is going to tell if this new government will succeed in getting South Africa to join the lions that are awakening, or if the country will continue on its path towards the abyss. But now it's your turn. Do you think your country's own government is fighting enough against corruption? Well, leave your answer in the comments below as well as in this survey, and I really hope you did enjoy this video. Please do hit that like button if you did, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for brand new videos every Monday and Thursday. Also, don't forget to check out our friends at the Reconsider Media podcast. They provided the vocals in this episode that were not mine, and as always, thank you for watching.